Hello and welcome to the show. This is episode 128 of the Meet the Farmers podcast, and I'm your host, Ben Eagle. Today, we're focusing on farm tenancies and their potential future. And I'm joined by a farmer who is very well placed to talk about this subject. Chris Cardell is based in Cornwall. And rents a Cornwall County farm smallholding. His family runs a herd of pedigree jerseys, supplying milk to Arla. He's also chair of the NFU's Tenant Forum and a representative on Defra's Tenancy Reform Industry Group. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. How are you doing down there in Cornwall? What's it like down there at the moment?
Morning. Yeah, it's a bit damp this morning. We've been lucky; we've had some good weather, but yeah, it's a bit damp. So for those of us who are grass growers, we're quite happy to see a bit of moisture.
Absolutely, I was going to say it's never a bad thing, is it? I mean, tell me about your part of Cornwall and how long you've been there, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I've always lived around mid Cornwall. Actually, we're here just not far outside. Well, sort of halfway between Truro and Snowstall. If any of you know, sort of Cornwall, so we're sort of south coast, just at the sort of mouth of the Roseland Peninsula, which many of you know, with St Moors and all that sort of area. So,
yeah, nice.
Yeah, we're quite lucky here around mid Cornwall. We can get to most places fairly quickly.
And what about the farm? As I mentioned in the intro, you're supplying milk to Arla.
Yeah, we're a county council small holding here. This is the third holding we've been on. Like everybody, we started on a part-time unit, then went to progressional holding, and then we've been here 16 years on this holding. We've got the dairy side of the business, but also we've also got a boarding kennels and cattery business. And when this one became the previous tenants had just started the diversification about 4 years before we came. When this came up, the wife previously had been into retail, so the landlords sort of, as I approached us, but asked us if we would be interested in having a look at it.
Okay.
So that's how we sort of got into it. And also, to a certain extent, for myself, it was moving back home because parents were, sort of, the story goes a little bit later on, but unfortunately, my dad died when I was only 8 months old, but they actually were tenants on a neighbouring estate. So it's sort of back home for me because I look out of the bedroom window at the one that they were on.
Nice.
Sort of 50 odd years ago, yeah. So
nice. And why jerseys? Why do you enjoy working with them?
We switched to jerseys some years ago. Actually, we were on the previous holding. We were on a lot of the investment, as on many small family units and council units, went in the 70s when cattle were a lot smaller. We were actually black and whites at that time,
okay.
But and like everybody else, we were 3 times milking, and we were doing all the mad things that everybody does. But it was around quotas as well, so. The systems were built for cattle that were much smaller than at the time we were on the black and whites, the large Holstein type stuff that was prevalent at that time. Quotas were killing us. We didn't have a very large quota on the farm. So like everybody else, you were either buying it at 70, 80 pence or you were releasing it at 15 pence a year.
Yeah.
And we were just looking to try and make best use of the quota that we had. But also to an animal that would fit in the facilities that were built back in the 70s.
Okay.
So that's how we sort of looked around, and we moved towards the jerseys. And also too, down around here, we've obviously got there's cream outlets, there's cheese outlets, and all lots of that. So they're all quite keen on a high quality product. And I just saw that looking forward, it just suited us. It suited our way of life, but also to I could see that potentially there was more advantage in transporting a high quality product than there was a watery product. But for the last 3 years, we've been on once a day milking. We're not a high input system. We switched 3 years ago to once a day. Probably 4 years ago now, thinking about it. The daughter was here at the time. She got married and moved away. So, I was looking around. She obviously did a lot of the jobs with me, and I was looking around. We're only just over 100 acres, small holding here. And we just thought, well, we couldn't afford to employ labour. So how were we going to cut the labour, really? It was one of the initials. But once we moved to the once a day milking, we wouldn't move back anymore. It suits us. It suits our girls, admittedly. We started in the autumn. We were a little bit apprehensive whether they would cope with the spring flush, but they do quite happily. They adjust to it. It takes a couple of years, possibly, for them to get back to where we only lost about 10 or 15% of yield at the time. But what really sort of balanced it out was that the quality went up. So although we were getting less literage, actually the milk check didn't change a lot.
Yeah.
When you look down to the bottom right-hand corner, by the time we took out all the other costs that we'd saved by going to once a day, actually we, financially we were no different, and the stress on the animals and us, and we're at a time of life when we've got some grandchildren around, and it just gave us more time to spend with family and grandchildren, and if we were needed.
Yeah, absolutely.
The two businesses here on the farm, it just took some of the pressure off us. So,
well,
we don't regret that.
Let's go back to your life growing up, and your interest back then. I mean, did you always want to farm?
Yeah, I come from we've got the Cardell family history going back to the 1500s in Cornwall.
Oh, fantastic. Wow.
And all farmers all the way through. And in fact, some of the ancestors actually farmed the Killicourt farm, which is the area of the farm that the sort of iconic Nuki was built on.
Amazing. So
we're always into farming all the way through, and even those that have gone abroad to Australia and all likes of that have all been in sort of farming world or Cork. Like I say, I was unfortunate. My dad died when I was only 8 months old. There were tenants on a neighbouring estate here, it was in the blood. And it all really started a little bit like most of us. My wife and I were both in the young farmers, and along came a farm tendering competition. We took part in that, and actually that was the sort of link in, really, because we got to know the local agent for the county farms at the time, because he was one of the judges, and he was really helpful. He was one of the old sort of traditional style agents. He was really helpful. We got to know him, and then subsequently, not long after that, a part-time holding came up, just a small 50-acre part-time holding, and we tendered, and we were lucky enough to get that. And then subsequently, in 4 and nearly 5 years, the neighbouring dairy holding came up. We tendered for that one, and we were lucky to get that one as well. It's one of those old clubbages, there were 120 there at the viewing day. Every single one won't get it. And that's what I always say to anybody who rings me up now, if you want it, go for it, because you never know how things are going to pan out.
And how competitive are a lot of tenders, and how's that changed? So how many applicants roughly do you get, or does it vary massively?
Yeah, it varies on the type of holding and where it is in the country. I think we've recently had there was a duchy farm here, not that far from us, that's up for let. I don't think the candidate's been chosen yet, but I have heard from on the grapevine that they've had more than they've ever had.
Wow.
I want to go for it. I hope they're doing the sums right, because things are changing coming down the line, and you hear some pretty beefy rents being thrown around at the moment. I know a lot of that is sort of pub talk, and agents will always pick out the big ones, won't they? They won't. They won't announce the farm. They've just let 50 they've just let 250. You got to bear a little bit of that in mind. But I think there's some strength out there. But what we are finding now is that there's a lot more criteria laid down in the letting particulars as far as greening goes, and all like that. I mean, I think that's a little bit that the landlords don't know anymore what's coming down the line than we have as the farmers for the last few years. So I think there's a little bit of trying to circumvent or sort of get ahead of the game to a certain extent and put a few things in there. But we've had some discussions with some of the landlords, so you need to be a little bit careful on that, because some of those things you put into the tenancy agreement may then fall foul of any grants and support coming down the line. If it's a requirement of the tenancy, will it be able to attract support going down the line, and will the two match? So some of the landlords have been quite flexible in how they've worded that, but the direction has gone. But we are also seeing some landlords who are holding and see what happens. Because some of that will go into contract and like so that. And our fear always is will we always get that back into the sector at a later date? And I'm sure you and those listening on the podcast have heard of instances in the areas where, landlords are already thinking about just putting it into greening, not actually putting a tenant on it. Or what we've been stressing all the way through to Defra is, look, a third of our food production in this country comes from the tenanted sector. If you then add in share, contract, and all the other sort of alternative agreements, we're rapidly reaching almost 50%. Of our land mass is in joint venture of some form or another. So it's a sector that Defra can't ignore, and we've got to get that balance right. So that's what a lot of our work is about.
Let's talk about the side of your life as a representative. So in terms of representation, you started as a tenants rep on the county farms letting committee. How did you first get involved, and why did you first want to get involved?
I was actually approached by, I would say, we had a traditional agent at the time. He was the old school of a spade was a spade. We didn't always agree, but when he came, if there was a rent review, if he came to the kitchen, he didn't leave until you had agreed. You may have differed, but you knew exactly where you were. We always got on really well. We were both probably of similar ilk in that respect, I suppose. And he invited. At that time, you were invited to do a term as a tenant rep, and we just sat on the letting committee. I think things in council have changed now. You can't have outsiders or unappointed people sitting in the committees, but at that time we could. So I was one of two. We have one for the north, one for the south, and that sort of sparked an interest. And it was really interesting, and sometimes it was really helpful because as a farmer you could pick out. Sometimes you see a family come through the door that have tendered. They may not be brilliant in an interview scenario, but if you start pulling out some of the points in their tender that makes them comfortable and get them to talk about what they know about, actually, things move on, and you can really get the best out of people in that respect. That was how that started, and how did I suppose that sort of then progressed to the NFU, and that was a classic case of young farmers to some extent. I was president of the local young farmers. we had a dinner, and the regional director came as the speaker that night, and she was looking to build up a team to lead on tenancy issues in the southwest. And we got chatting, and within a month before I knew it, I was I'd gained another job.
Funny how life works. I mean, in terms of the sort of the stuff that you were focusing on then compared to today, were they similar issues, or have you seen changes at all?
When I was with the council, that was just purely on the letting committee, so I didn't have a lot to do with the sort of political side, but behind that, once they then sort of progressing into the NFU work, it hasn't. The issues may have changed, obviously, in the last sort of 18 months, greatly, but the work hasn't changed that much. It's still, if there's a member issue, we deal with it, I'm biased. I chair the NFU committee, don't I? So I'm going to be biased. But actually, I think, personally, I think the NFU tenant representation is one of the best in the country, because tenancy is only part of the business, isn't it? And I think the beauty of being, we've got a really good structure within the NFU tenant representation. So there's one of me in each region.
Okay.
Member representation. There's also two within each region. There'll be an advisor with a skill set matched who leads on tenancy issues in the region as well. And a number of those are surveyors or ex-surveyors as well. So we've got that skill set. And then obviously at HQ, we've got Louise Staples, who's our lead surveyor, and then Eleanor with us as well. So between that is our sort of setup with the tenancy issues. We then integrate with all the other work that's going on. So, the tenancy issue is part of our business as a tenant member, but it's how does it fit in the rest of the business? And I think it's really, really become more of a point in the last few years that, there's so much coming down the line, isn't there? From Defra and changes, and that's affecting every farm business, but it's how do we fit the tenant sector into all of those schemes.
It's just there are certain people who come on this show who are, I mean, everyone I class as a busy person because they're just all busy, but I mean between the cows, the kennels, this work as well, and family life as well? You know, how do you tend to balance things?
I was going to say, we are really lucky in that we've got regional advisors, we've got the national office as well. So the sort of technical, so if a member rings me with an issue or rings in to call first with an issue, I know where to direct it. So, I'm not saying
you've got a good team.
I know where the specialist is who can deal with that. It may be a taxation issue, you know, it may, especially within tenancy, you know, there's lots of taxation issues. Or it may just be, you know, a rent review or anything else. And on top of that, we've also got, local surveyor panel firms that we use as well. So we've got a massive back support for all of those issues. Time-wise, yeah, it's been a bit different in the last 18 months, isn't it? For all of us, you know. So yeah, I can do a meeting here with, you know, you guys up in Essex, or you know, and we've all done that. We charge around the country as we do, you know. And I've left Peterborough on an evening, you know, after a 10 o'clock meeting, driven home all the way through the night because I had a milk the next morning. You know, we all do those things. You know, we're all farmers. We all do those things. I know we shouldn't, but we do. It is a busy life, but I have missed meeting the members. You know, and that feedback you get not only during a meeting, but in a drink in the bar.
Absolutely.
Somebody will come up and say, well, you know, actually we've got some issues, or there might be a positive, or there might be a negative in our area. And you pick up a lot more when you meet somebody, and when you see somebody face to face. And also, too, it's not only us doing our work; it's identifying the next representatives or officers or staff coming through. That succession plan is much easier when you know somebody, you know. And also, too, if you're trying to put a group together to you know, a committee together or whatever to solve a problem. If you know the people well and you've met them, you know their skill sets, and you know you can put a better team together if you know everybody personally. But, you know, that'll come back, and we'll deal with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and talking those conversations that you have with people, what are people telling you in terms of what those key challenges that the tenants are facing now? And a lot of those is going to be crossover with wider industry challenges.
Yeah, a lot of those are crossover. Obviously, a lot will depend on the landlord to a certain extent. You know, some landlords are pushing very much towards a greening issue, you know, sort of ethos, and some of our long-established tenants didn't get into it in that ethos, and their skill set or their mindset might not be working out. So sometimes you have a crossover of sort of aspirations. Occasionally you get a young son or daughter takes over the estate, and then things can change quite rapidly. You know, they have different aspirations to the old guard that were there, so that might change things. Some of the institutionals tend to stay fairly constant. So, but also, you know, now is really how do we fit the tenanted world into what's coming down the line. You know, some of the things that are coming down the line are very difficult in the tenant sector. Net zero is a crucial one. You know, everybody's talking about carbon trading and all likes of that. And as we all know, there isn't really a tool yet to value that carbon trading. Lots of people are trying to do it. But the danger is that we'll trade it away before we even know what it is. So, you know, and on what proportion of that is the tenants, what is the landlords, you know, here ourselves, you know, for a number of years, partly because of the topography, we're quite a steep farm. So we've done things like overseeding and subsoiling and aerating and all those sorts of things we've done for some time because it suited us better than ploughing. But, you know, we've done a lot, so our carbon footprint is quite low already. Yeah. Especially once they milk in, you know, when there's not a lot of transport, not a lot of diesel burn and all those sorts of things. So it's how do we apportion that to the tenant and how much it is apportioned to the landlord. You know, so those are the discussions we're having. Some landlords are being quite boisterous about that. You know, there's one or two probably around in your area as well.
And I mean, in terms of what we know about the next 5 years, say, I mean, what does the transition period look like from a tenant's perspective as far as you can grapple it at the moment?
Some of it is okay. We managed to get a few changes through the sort of trade and all that sort of work within the transition document like that. So there's some bits in there. There's some work going on looking at taxation and likes of that. I don't think taxation will make a big change in this country like as in Ireland. It's their taxation system and their tenanted sector is completely but vastly different to what we are. Okay. So I don't think there'll be too much come over from there. There's be some bits that we can bring. It's getting it to meet. So one of the things that's sort of coming down the line and worries me quite a bit is around the sort of infrastructure lack of spend that's been on farms, especially on tenanted farms, because a lot of our landlords are asset rich, but they're not cash rich either. So they haven't made massive investments. And we here we're a county council smallholder. Well, under the old regimes, the county council were not allowed to claim any grants. So they've had to find all the money themselves to do going forward. And so there's a backlog of spend before we start. And if we now look at the sort of farm water thing that's been kicking off lately, there's lots of talking more storage needed and clean air that scheme as well. Lots of talk about that around storage and all those sorts of things. And also to farm assurance, there's lots of things that better buildings, all great things, but
they all cost money.
They all cost money, and if you're on a short-term tenancy, you're not going to make that spend. So one of the pluses that we hope is that it will encourage longer tenancies without having to change the legislation. Just the drive to make those investments, that landlords and tenants will work together more to deliver that. But it does worry me the sort of the other side of it where that can happen. I've got a great fear is that if we have too much pinch on our smaller family units and the county council units, which traditionally are our starter units for the next generation. And if we don't get that investment and options to be able to drive that investment to deliver the aspirations that comes within these new schemes, there could be a real pinch on the tenancy sector. That's the one that worries me quite hard at the moment.
Okay. Yeah. And what about predictions of when we get to the end of the transition period and BPS is withdrawn and we're in this new climate? What's the feeling at the moment in terms of impact on tenants? Again, there's going to be large variation between
there's going to be
different instances
and different instances around the country, and it'll be depending on what sort of topography and all of that, as events always do. But we're moving towards where the majority are now beginning to become FPT, so it becomes a bit more market.
Yeah.
And in the past, the AHAs have been quite good because it's been earning potential. The FPT, it's open market value, and I think what we're stressing is that everybody needs to really do those sums now, not just what are the sums today, what do they look like now, but what are they going to look like in 4 or 5 years' time?
Because
we're looking at the trade deals as well. The trade deals could have a big effect on rental values as the BPS if the truth is.
Yeah.
If we're talking about a dairy unit, the BPS is not that, perhaps a penny a litre, depending
Absolutely.
on the so it's not that big an effect. But the trade deals could have a massive effect.
Absolutely.
Going forward on that. So it's we're saying it, and we're really encouraging everybody to really do their sums. And I think that there will start to come a point from now on where tenants will think about putting rent reviews back in against the landlords. It's tended to be the other way until now. But I think, as more comes out of the detail and what we can or can't get going forward, I think, that's going to be a bit more of a challenge. Maybe we have got a dog in the back.
I was going to say, listeners, that this is proof that that Chris is out of kennels. We've only got one. We should be thankful we've only got one going off at the moment.
yeah. Luckily, it's only just around in next door.
So, as we mentioned in the beginning, you're also on Defra's Tenancy Reform Industry Group. A lot of listeners might know not not know what that is. I have to say my knowledge of what that isn't great. What can you just talk a bit
Yeah,
more about that?
it's a little bit of goes back to when Labour were in power, actually.
Okay.
And they were looking at doing some changes within the tenanted sector, and they pulled a group together. So it's made up of stakeholders. So there's ourselves from the NFU. There's obviously the CLA, TFA,
Yeah.
9 or 10 of us on there,
Okay.
stakeholders. And it waned a little bit. One of the difficulties of getting things to work within the tenanted sector, it has to work for everybody. So there's no point having one stakeholder in the room trying to design the future, because it won't work. So the best way of designing the future is to get all of us as stakeholders back in the room. You as the minister have the final say, but we can work in groups and put that forward. So going into sort of when the transition was coming out, it was recalled and we were put into working groups. So we had a working group on young entrants, we had a working group on taxation, and all the various sectors of it. So there was a lot of input back into there. And then obviously we had the tenancy reform consultation that came out. There were some suggestions in there that got favour. There were some suggestions in there that didn't get favour. Some of that's gone through. So yeah, it's a really good sounding board, and if there's some tweaks that are needed within legislation, it's much easier if everybody sits in the room with we've got CAB, we've got the whole lot within the room. It's much easier to sort of feedback to Defra then, as we think this could work for the industry.
Yeah.
So I think it's a crucial organisation, really. I feel it is anyway, because otherwise, if we don't have that sort of joint approach, we could. And I suppose that's been one of the downsides of the last 18 months, is that some of those groups, throughout the industry, and they are broken into smaller groups. And if you've got a smaller group, one person in that room might have an agenda to push that isn't the same as everybody else.
Yeah.
To me, I'm really keen that we get back and we get everybody back in the room again, working as one.
Let's bring us back to a farm level. If someone listening is interested in taking on a farm tenancy, not sure where to start, what are those sort of practical steps that they can take? What would you advise?
Well, I say the option that we started with was the young farmers and the farm tendering competition. Some of those tendering competitions are still out there, and we do a few within regions as well now still. And we can always bring in advisors. So if you want to do something in your area, then make contact with one of us as the reps and the regional advisor, and we can put something on, whether you're members or no, or whether you're just local YFC or whatever. We can do that to help. But if you're seriously looking at experience of sitting on tendering interviews, is that make sure you know what you're tendering. Or all too often, I don't think it happens so much now, but we went through a phase where somebody would get the agent and do the tender, and you're sat there looking at this thing, you know very well they haven't done it, and you pick out a point in it that's embedded quite deep. You get this blank look. It's much better to me personally, it's better to have a slightly less professional finished product, but one that you really know what you're talking about.
Yep.
That's the crucial part. And get as many ducks in order as you can in advance. So, if you need to go and speak to a bank manager, get that done. Get a letter of support from them. Get all those sorts of things done. Talk to some farmers that are in the area that, if you're not from that area, talk to some neighbours, because farmers generally like talking to other farmers.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially youngsters. If there's a youngster coming on, they're quite happy to talk to that. So always learn as much about the farm and the area, like I said before, the landlord, as you can in advance, and then draw your strengths out within the tenancy agreement. Don't go over.
Bring us back to you. I mean, you've got a lot going on, and you've always had a lot. But I mean, what's next for you?
I've done several years at this now, so I'm slowly stepping back and let another take the role now. For us as a family, we we started on, when we started, there were options of retirement tenancies for the county farms. So we had a retirement tenancy at the beginning, and then as we moved, it's moved to an FBT. We've always been able to negotiate the same term length. And part of what went through within the transition document and the tenancy reforms were that at that time it was 65, because that's what retirement was. And we said, well, actually now, things have changed. Yeah. So within that reform, it was changed that landlords, it was mainly around councils, they were the only ones that did the retirement tenancies, that they could opt to the retirement age at that time.
Okay.
So yeah, we were here until we retire, sort of thing. We're driving on the kennels business because we've got full-time staff, and we appreciate they put in, and actually we're both, the wife and I, are people type people.
Yeah.
So we enjoy meeting. 99%. You get the odd one, as you do in any industry, in any business. But yeah. Probably after this is all finished, we'll write a book on some of the stories.
Yeah, I'll buy a coffee.
Yeah, and then some of the intrigues of the way people look after their pets is quite intriguing.
I can imagine. Yeah,
we'll probably write a book at the end of it. But yeah, and we're lucky that we got a son and daughter. The son was never interested in the farm, and he was always musical. So he lives he's sort of your way. He lives Guildford.
Okay.
So he's in music industry, rapping and all those sorts of things. He went to college and never came back. And the daughter, she's married to a farmer, and they actually started up their contract business from here. So although we haven't, but this is always the argument that people say, well, we haven't moved. So what has the county farm achieved, sort of thing? But actually, the son and daughter started their contract business from here. Yep. They now run 200 odd acres of their own. They've got their own contract business, employing 3 or 4 tracks.
Which is in itself further growth in the rural economy.
Also through the kennels, we've always tended to take on students from colleges. We train them on, well, I think there's about 5 that have come through our system now, run their own businesses as well. So that's that. And also too, within the kennel business, we've got about 3,500 customers on the books, which are all pretty well, apart from the last 18 months, pretty well all local people.
Yeah.
So provide, so there's a service to the taxpayer as well, and the money that the county farm system always returns a revenue, so that goes back into the pot. So that's our sort of angle with county farms. You've got to look at the wider picture. What does it deliver? Not did that tenant come there for 5 years and then did he move on to a 500-acre Dutch farm? Because those sorts of holdings don't come up all the time.
Yeah.
In the past, when the daughter and son-in-law were here, we looked at moving, but the opportunities didn't come up at that time, and you just got to go with what's on the table with you at the time. So
I mean, before you go, and I know there's it's different situation in different counties, but I mean, from your point of view, how does the future of the county farms look at the moment?
Actually, we're part of the reforms where we managed to get them to sit down and do long-term strategy reviews, because what was happening was that the political cycle of county farms is just the sort of 3 or 4 year cycle, really, because the councils just get voted in. They have aspirations of what they can do as a whole with the whole county council portfolio, and then they want to put up a school or whatever. So the danger is always that the money gets siphoned off into those projects.
Okay.
Then the farms fall farther behind, and we can all think of instances of estates that have been sold off purely because they cherry pick the best holdings to pay for other services within the council portfolio, and then they're left with holdings that are little value, and they lose their size of mass and their effective running costs and all that. So what we've tried to do within that is now to get them all to do a long-term strategy. We've got a long-term strategy. That's good because it sets it apart, and also to those that sort of sold off their estates then looked around like, well, hang on, we haven't got as many assets to borrow against now. Actually, the county farm estate has grown in value. It gives them an asset that they can borrow very cheap money at, off the back of. So lots of things like that. But also too, now as we're moving into greening, net zero, all those sorts of things, the estate can deliver a lot of that for the council. Our holding here, we're right on the edge of a village, and we've got a bridleway that goes right through the middle of our farm. And during the walk down, we had 300-400 people walking through of a day. So actually, a lot of people have got out and seen us that didn't know we were here. So there's a lot that the estate can deliver in greening, health, exercise, all of that, those sorts of values we can add in to the county portfolio. So yeah, it's trying to draw more out of to make it an asset that they don't want to get rid of. Really, that's what it is. Because for an industry, it's a great opportunity for them getting in. And for the larger estates, it's great for them as well, because they come with somebody who's created a background. They've got a portfolio that they bring with them. They might have to borrow a shed load of money to move to the next stage, but they've got a track record that they can show that landlords, and that helps to secure longer tenancies, because landlords don't like giving long tenancies to an insecure person that they don't know very much about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great. We always finish the show with the same 2 questions, which I'm going to ask you now. First is, if you have a message for the public, what is it?
Message for the public. I suppose the last 18 months has helped a great deal in that we've been able to tell our story, and people are now buying local, and people are more interested in what we do. So it may be a message for the public, but it's a message that we've got to get over as well. So I know next week is Black British Farming Day again, isn't it?
Yep.
So that's going to come up. So that's I think that's where we've got to go. We've got to work with the public to tell our story, and especially if we're going to be in competition with other parts of the world under different trade agreements. We've got to tell our story the best we can, and I think it's up to all of them, not only the NFU but all organisations to join forces in that. Because if we don't do it ourselves, nobody's going to do it for us, really.
Yeah. And finally, a message for farmers.
Well, I suppose today, as we're recording this, it's World Suicide Day, isn't it? Awareness Day. So I think if not trying to be pessimistic, but I think times have changed. There's a lot of challenges coming down the line, but I think hopefully within the industry we've got a lot better at talking to each other and supporting each other. Personally, we support the farmer charities and do some work with the RBI and the FCN and Addington and that as well. And I think we've got a great support network within our industry and those charities. But it's just to talk to the neighbours, talk to your friends, and really try and help each other out, because our suicide rate and our accident rate within our industry is not great. And those are 2 areas I think we can do a lot for ourselves in both of those areas.
Really good words. Good message to end it on, I think. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. We could have talked all day about lots more, I'm sure, but that's all we've got time for. But no, thank you for giving us your thoughts. Thank you very much for listening as well. I'm taking a week off the podcast next week because I've got quite a busy week with other projects, but we'll be back the following week. So I hope you can join me then. But until then, have a great week for this week.